I want to talk today a little bit about some research I've been doing lately. I spent some time researching DevSecOps. I wanted to dive deeper into it and understand the mechanics of it, and in doing that, I reached some other conclusions about DevSecOps that I want to share. Um, First of all, why did I spend some time doing this? And obviously, there's all the technical reasons about SDLC, but I think that this quote from Paul Proctor really captures what I was going after, which is an approach for cybersecurity that balances priorities and investments against the protection and running the business. Are we reaching the right combination of productivity and security and risk management? And to me, this goes straight to the heart of what DevSecOps means for me. So let's talk about a couple of key concepts before we dive into things. So if you've researched DevSecOps, you're familiar with the term shift left. Now I label it agile, and it's not a comment about the agile methodology, it's about agility, and that's going to be part of the outcome I'm going to talk a little bit about. And what this means is that the QA processes, your security testing, shifts to the left, closer to development and into the hands of developers, into the hands of the frontline people. And this is really a key element of this versus the traditional or current waterfall. Hopefully, you're moving away from waterfall, but I'm going to relate this to how security projects take place today. In that, for example, if you take a security process like third party risk management, typically we are doing these assessments in the latter stages of vendor selection and the latter stages of a project where it's possible that the vendor has already been selected and we're now forced to do a very compressed assessment of that vendor. What I found in DevSecOps is that waterfall and that late implementation of security leads to friction. It leads to friction within your security team. It leads to friction with your stakeholders because they're waiting. And by and large, you're so late in the process that changes are hard to make. You may not be able to make any changes at all, or you wind up documenting changes that hopefully will be implemented in the relatively near future. And quite often, they just never happen. So let's go into some of the things that I found that I experienced in my exposure to the DevSecOps community. So the first is cooperation. I sat in on Skill Up, which was a full day DevSecOps conference, and I found the level of cooperation and the level of acceptance and openness within that community just amazing. There were people who were very receptive to me as a CISO being part of the DevSecOps conference, and there was also a level of transparency. And this transparency blends into the essentials of DevSecOps. Cooperation and transparency, they go hand in hand in this case, because in setting up automated security tests in containers and putting those containers into the development processes, we're working directly with those stakeholders and they understand the desired outcomes of the QA process, of the security testing, in part because they're part of it. If I can use the word part twice. Sorry, it's just something I do. And we've now established cooperation and transparency, thinking back to something like vendor risk management. Do we really have that or not? And I'll talk about why that's important. That level of cooperation and transparency and eliminating defects early in the development cycle leads to speed and agility because you're not following the waterfall method. You're removing risk items earlier in the process. Again, let's relate that back to vendor risk management. If the vendor risk management process is shifted left, then we're making the stakeholders part of that assessment process, and we're making this security part of the process. So we're getting cooperation, transparency, and we're getting speed and agility. And all of that leads us to outcomes. And this is why I really like the quote from Paul Proctor, because this is about outcomes. Today's business is expected to go faster than it ever has. And if we don't have these four qualities in our security processes, if we're not finding ways to shift left, not only in DevSecOps, but in other key security processes, we're going to be seen as the blockers. We're going to be curbing the capability of the business to execute. So I think some part of reaching that balance between the investments and priorities of security and the outcomes for our business involves finding ways to apply shift left. So I would really love it if others would talk about ways they've applied shift left, even if you didn't call it that. Let's talk about the things that we're doing to accelerate security and to make it inherent to our processes rather than something that gets tacked on in the later stages of projects. Thank you.